Hello, Internet, and welcome to this week's edition of 1 Minute Answers from 1 Minute Economics, an edition dedicated to central banking. And as always, before getting started with the two questions you guys have asked me, I want to pick the topic for next week, and the topic for next week is going to be geopolitics. So if you have a general question for me, such as, for example, what the relationship between geopolitics and economics is, or if you want to ask me something related to a specific geopolitical event, like, for example, the G20 summit that people are talking about these days, or anything else for that matter, simply ask me a question by writing a comment below, and I'm going to do my best to answer next week. For today's first question, Mr. Map noticed that there are a few countries that don't have their own central bank, and he would like to know why, and of course, why those specific countries. Now, first of all, while central banking is ridiculously popular nowadays, I think it's interesting to take a few steps back and look at things from a really big picture historic perspective, and quite frankly, the popularity of central banking is still a new thing. Like, for example, in the year 1900, there were only 18 of them. But of course, nowadays it's commonplace to simply assume that a country has its own central bank, but there are exceptions. And I would like to highlight three categories. Number one, tiny nations that we can pretty much consider economically insignificant. Like, for example, we have island states such as Tuvalu, who, as a fun fact, have the country code for their domain .tv, kind of like Germany has .de or the United Kingdom has .co.uk. So they don't have a central bank. The Federated States of Micronesia don't have a central bank either. So yeah, that would be category number one. Number two, countries that don't formally have a central bank, but which have entities that handle the stuff a central bank would normally handle. Like, for example, in Andorra, you have the Andorran National Institute of Finance, which may not be the formal central bank of Andorra, but it's kind of like the country had a central bank. Number three, situations in which a certain country needs a central bank a lot less than in the past. Like, for example, we can think about the dollarized system in Panama, which does beg the question, if as of a certain point your country starts using, let's say, the US dollar, then maybe we could ask ourselves if it's time to eliminate the central bank of the country in question, with, of course, the elephant in the room being represented by the Eurozone. And it's kind of interesting to think about the fact that, since Eurozone nations use the euro, then maybe as of a certain point, individual central banks will simply be eliminated from the equation. So, all in all, the overwhelming majority of countries do have their own central bank at this point, but there are definitely a few interesting exceptions. Today's second question comes from Bill, who asked if central banks did indeed save the day after the Great Recession, and Bill mentions, of course, that central banks claim they did, but he would like my input as well. First of all, I think it's a smart idea to try to see things from the perspective of today's big decision makers, and to do that, it helps if we draw a parallel between the Great Depression of 1929 and the reaction, or rather lack thereof, of the Hoover administration on the one hand, and on the other hand, the Great Recession of 2007 to 2008. And it becomes obvious that the authorities wanted to avoid the mistakes of the past, because many economists like to think about what the Hoover administration did as being a textbook example of how not to react after a shock such as a financial crisis. Now, did they save the day? That's the trillion-dollar question. And on the one hand, if by saving the day you're actually referring to the day as in the short-term implications of the things that have been done, then I'd say there's enough evidence for us to say that yes, they've averted an immediate meltdown of the financial system, and as such, they have saved the day. On the other hand, though, if by saving the day you're referring to the short-term as well as long-term implications, then I would tend to say that the jury's still out because not that much time has passed since the Great Recession, and it's just too early to tell, especially since there are definitely things that make us raise an eyebrow, such as, for example, the fact that here we are 10 years later with interest rates barely having gone up a bit in the United States, and let's not even talk about the European Union or Japan where they went negative. So for this reason, I would say that there are basically two dimensions. One, if by saving the day you're only referring to the short-term implications of the central banking actions after the Great Recession, then I would say yes, they have saved the day, at least in the short term. If by saving the day you're referring to the big picture as well, then I, for one, prefer to stay away from a verdict at this point, and I'm going to simply say this: we don't know. That's it for today, guys. Thanks a lot for tuning in to yet another edition of 1 Minute Answers from 1 Minute Economics. And remember, the topic for next week is geopolitics. So if you have a question about geopolitics in general, if you have a question about the relationship between economics and geopolitics, or if you have concerns about a certain geopolitical event, simply ask me by writing a comment below and I will do my best to answer next week. As always, please be active in the community, like my videos, comment, be involved in debates, and of course, subscribe to 1 Minute Economics if you haven't by now. If you can, please also develop the habit of telling your friends about 1 Minute Economics, because even something like a quick message on Facebook about how you like my channel and you think people should check it out helps tremendously. And finally, those who can afford to and want to help the channel financially as well can do so by buying my book or by donating through PayPal, Bitcoin, or Patreon. For more info, please head on over to 1minuteeconomics.com. Thanks a lot, guys, and have an awesome weekend.